All right, dude. Matt, man.
How's it going?
Sawborg, man. How's it going?
Good, good. Hanging in there.
Awesome, awesome. So, dude, I mean, I gotta ask, man. Simon Bisley, getting
Yeah.
him to do the art, man.
Yeah, that was it was awesome. It just happened to be that we were at a comic book convention, and it was the funniest thing because we were in the green room. We went and set up and everything. We went to the green room to get some drinks and get some food and stuff. And I see him over in the corner. He's got like a handful of beers, and he's like just and and I was like, "Oh man, that's Bisley. Oh, I gotta go just fess on how cool he is and everything." So I go over and I'm like, "Hey man, my name's Matt. I'm in this band called Gwar." He goes, "Gwar, no way!" And he just like bear hugs me and he's like, "You guys are awesome." So it was like right off the bat, we were like the long lost cousins found each other.
Oh, dude.
Yeah,
Dude, that's so rad, man.
yeah,
Simon Bisley's like the coolest dude. Like, he's like so metal, man. Like,
yeah,
I think at one point he was doing like bodybuilding
yeah, yeah.
or
He's
powerlifting or something.
working out and everything. Yeah, he does that.
Yeah, no, he's like such a badass, man. Like he's like,
Yeah, it's
I
like
mean, he looks like Lobo, man.
yeah, if you say like Frazetta on crack.
Yeah, did you ever watch that Frazetta documentary they did? Or no, there was like another video, because like I think Simon Bisley was doing like something with Danzig with like the Frazetta stuff,
Hmm.
and Frazetta is like so cool, man, because
Yeah,
like he said something like, "Yeah, I just didn't want him to make it look real stupid," or told him not to make it look stupid, or something. When he was talking about like continuing doing that stuff with Danzig, so I don't know, Frazetta's
yeah.
cool, man.
It's interesting to see like his inspirations. Like you go Frazetta, definitely had some inspirations, but his his take on it, it's just so like visual. And then there's a bunch of artists who were inspired by Bisley who went off to go do their own styles that are pretty cool as well. So um yeah, it's awesome, man. He's such a good dude. I love working with him, and he's a hoot. He's our conversations are like usually like, okay, well we can't talk for like 3 hours, and then we'll talk for like 3 hours. Crazy nerd shit and fucking fun, cool stuff, and yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, did you ever get Simon Bisley to like a Gwar show or?
He was supposed to come to one. We're gonna try to do one of the festivals, and it's funny because I think it's very like British or European about like, well, that's 2 hours away. That's forever. Because like we're America, we're like 2 hours, no problem. It's like
Yeah.
British. They're like 2 hours. That's like half the country. Oh my gosh, you expect me to travel that far? So he looked at like a date, and I think he saw it and he was like, "Oh yeah, that'd be cool." And then he realized how far it was, and he was like, "That's just a million miles away from me." So yeah, he hasn't made it out to a show yet, which is shame because he definitely he's in our vein of what war is for sure.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned it because I remember somebody from over there was talking about like, oh yeah, it's crazy. Like you guys in America, you guys like will drive like an hour. Like my mom lives like an hour away, and I never see her. You
Yeah,
know, like I'm like, you never see her, mom. Like,
yeah,
dude,
yeah. That
like,
we were at, we had a guy who was it was a German guy who was asking Bobby about where in proximity to where we live to New York City. And so we kept saying, we're like further south. And he's like, oh, like Queens. And you're like, no, like south. He's like, oh, the Bronx. He's like, no, Brooklyn. You're like, no, like we're like 6 hours away. He's like, 6 hours away. What are you talking about? Like to conceive like driving 6 hours is like half the country, like it was funny. It was just definitely interesting that that's the take. But yeah, like with Bisley, it's very simpatico as well because 2000 AD was definitely a heavy inspiration in the early Gwar days. There was so many of those magazines like Heavy Metal in 2000 AD that were just like pumping out that type of awesome science fiction and fantasy artwork that just inspired, I think a lot of the artists and stuff from that time period. So definitely cool to hang out with, and the fact that Bisley is actually cool, because you meet people sometimes and you're like, oh man, I wish I had met this person. That blew my whole fantasy of how cool this person could be,
Yeah.
but you know, but yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, because like I seen him at a convention and I met him and I had like like a couple comic books I was gonna have him sign. Like it was obviously like Lobo and it was like a Punisher, and like a Conan, like he did the sick Conan cover.
oh yeah,
And he was like, I think the guy was like, oh yeah, it's like $15 to get a book signed, each. And I'm like, oh yeah, and he's like, no, I'll just sign them all for $15. You're cool, because
that's all
I think like because you get those people with like the stack of books, and they want I think he just was like, oh, this guy's a fan. No, he just wants,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, he's cool like that.
Yeah, and like Lobo, man, like dude, Gwar and Lobo, man, that would be a sick
we were we were
crossover.
definitely we were definitely fans. Like when it was coming out, me and Hunter were collecting all of them when he first started coming out. We're like, man, this is definitely just straight up, Gwar stuff. And the cool thing about like, so I guess they did. I think they're working on the movie now, and it's going to be Jason Momoa is going to be and I think he fits. I mean, he looks like him, like, and he'll be super big and huge and stuff. So that'll be cool. Now, if they don't cop out, they just make it like R rated, then what
Yeah.
business.
I mean, you got like James Gunn, dude, and James
Yeah.
Gunn's Trauma, man. So
Yep. He's definitely helping. Like the what's the one that's the Monster Squad, or no, what is it? Monster Commandos, Creature.
oh yeah, 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 I know what you're talking about.
That's one of the. So I was like, oh, because it's just like how disappointing that a lot of the Marvel movies and a lot of the shows and stuff have been lately, and then DC had already always had a struggle to try to keep to that magnitude, and I think that's the first one that I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. That show is spot on. So if they can kind of go that route with the relaunches of all these movies and all these new shows, then I think DC will definitely give Marvel a run for their money when it comes to that genre. I mean, because Marvel's just flailing so poorly with their movies and stuff lately. It's just like, what are you gonna do?
Um, that and the Swamp Thing. Did you have the Swamp Thing show?
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
sick.
My only beef with that was Blue Devil, and because I'm a Blue Devil fan, and I really didn't like how they handled that arc. I think it could have been cooler, and the fact that like if you're gonna make, it's like that's the perfect excuse to have like a crazy cheesy costume because it's a guy trapped in a costume, right? Like that's the whole premise. So it's like if you wanted to make it cartoony and cool looking just like the book, then you should, you know, stylizing it, making it look too real or that kind of stuff. It's like, come on, man. Like that loses its charm, because it is supposed to be a guy trapped in a suit. So um anyways, but and the fact that yes, the Swamp Thing, that series I thought was handling the story line really well, and I thought that they were going down that road, and the fact that I guess people just didn't support it enough, it got canceled, and I was like, oh, you know,
They like put it on. I think it was like HBO Max, but then they put it like on like actual like TV for a
Mhm.
little bit. But I think it was like on a Sunday or something. But I think it would cost too much or
I
something to
mean,
make.
it's always the case, and that's the sad thing about shows like that, where you're like high production, unless you have the support of a really big audience, they're just not going to last.
Yeah, because there was like a show recently that came out. It came out around Halloween. It was like the end of like October called Hysteria, and Bruce Campbell was in it,
Oh, nice.
and it was like really rad. and because it took place in the 80s and they were like all metal and like Bruce Campbell's in it, so it's automatically awesome. But
Right.
they like canceled it. But I don't know. I loved it. Everybody else loved it, but they put it like on some streaming service that nobody watched and stuff. So
Yeah. Typical.
yeah. So did and also you what was it, Sawborg did a live stream with Sleazy P, and you guys had Tesco on from the
Yep.
Meat Men.
Yeah. Yeah. We're buds with Tesco. He's a good dude too, man.
Because I'm in Lansing, Michigan, and that's where Tesco is.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
did you
He's
got any, you got any Meat Men stories?
Oh, well, so like when we did that run with he had, because he'd always pulled out the stops with like having like confetti cannons and all kinds of crazy like blow up stuff and masks and stuff. We were out with this band called Brutal Juice, and I think they're from like Lubbock, Texas, or something like that. And the coolest, one of the coolest things was it was like second to the last show, or it might have been the last show of that tour. Um, uh, we were playing the Trocadero in Philadelphia, and I remember. So that was when we had the World Maggot, right? And so when we were doing our encore, Tesco didn't tell any of us what he was going to do, but he got all the Brutal Juice to put. They stripped down to their underwear, so they were all in their underwear, and then they had masks and whatever like boas and whatever crazy costume pieces that Tesco had, and they all came out during the World Maggot scene with every single confetti cannon that he had, and they just launched it, and it looked like red bloody snow for like a good 3 minutes of like just it was just a mess. It was just such cacophony. It was so awesome. But yeah, it was a hoot. He was always doing all kinds of fun stuff on that trip, and he's just such a big, figure that it's hard not to be like, oh man, that dude's cool. Because he's into all the same cool stuff we are. He loves horror films and all that cool stuff. So he's again, I think there's so many like second cousins in our industry of people who are like definitely scum dog undercover scum dogs.
Yeah. Oh, because I've seen him, but like I've never met him. I've always been like kind of scared to meet him because I mean he's like almost like the Clint Eastwood of like punk rock.
Right, yeah, that's a good way to explain them.
And I don't know. I'll have to meet him someday because I have like I always like bring it. Like I got like a cassette tape, like the Meat Man, and I always like, oh dude, I'm gonna get it signed, and I'm always like scared to like approach him for some reason, man. I don't know. He's
Oh,
just so like
it is
cool.
it is tough to get over those, but just he's a dude. You can walk up to him and say hey or nay. It's always the thing. It's like the misnomer, right? Like if you think about it, like in terms of if you're having a bad day and something happens like that, then you're
Yeah.
you might be a dick. But if you're having a good day and you're like, oh hey, somebody appreciates the stuff I do, it's really you have to be a really big asshole to be like, fuck you for liking the shit I like that I do. Like
Yeah.
it's like why would you do that? You're like, oh, thank you for appreciating the stuff I do. That's awesome. Here, what do you need? It doesn't take that.
Oh.
You know.
Well, because we were talking, James Gunn did. He worked for Trauma, obviously. You big Trauma fan?
Yeah, I there. That's the hit or miss, right? With Trauma, there was so much. There was some genius caked into some. Uh, let's be nice. Opportunistic. Well, I don't. I don't want to say anything bad. It's just basically like I feel like there's that level. There's films that are genius that are well pulled off at those lower budgets in their catalog that they did, but they put out a bunch of stuff that they really didn't have anything to do with. So there's that part where it's like, how do you gauge all that? Because it's like, is it the fact that they could culminate all these cool IPs together to make their catalog of all these colorful, crazy characters they have, plus all these other movies they put out that would have never seen the light of day? Because you talk like a guy like James Gunn, right? Like, what was that one he did with? Because his wife at the time was Pam from The Office.
Oh, Slither.
What's that?
Slither.
Yeah. So yeah, so they did a film, a trauma film together, and
Oh, they did. Cause he did Romeo and Juliet.
yeah, and so then he had that under his belt, and I think that was right. If I'm getting the timetables right, he went and did a film with her. It's like a comedy slash a little gross, whatever. But um, it was like giving guys like that the opportunity to be show their work, show where they were going, because I mean that's now he's directed some of the biggest movies, out there, and obviously he knows what he's doing. So, yeah, to give people like that opportunities who wouldn't have that, that's another thing that Troma was good at. I feel like they also leaned into just it's almost like Canon, right? Like Canon was like, we're gonna do everything. You're like, should you do everything? Maybe not, but but if you look at their catalog, they put out so many cool freaking movies and arguably probably influenced the whole generation of people, filmmakers, storytellers, all that stuff because of just how batshit crazy amount of stuff they put out, So that being said, yes, Troma, I like a lot of their stuff. In fact, we always, we see them at the conventions and stuff and talk to the who's ever still there and whatever. And yeah, they're good folks. And you can't argue like those iconic like Toxic Avenger and Kabuki Cop and all those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so did the mid galactic wrestling, man. Are you a big wrestling fan?
Oh yeah, that's what kind of drew me and Hunter together was when I first met him. We were talking about just stuff we were into and everything, and that was really one of those initial like, oh, you like wrestling? I like wrestling. I'm into wrestling too. Who's your favorite wrestler? What do you like, dude? What blah blah blah? Because we would talk about like this was still right when there was all the territories, so you had all the different regions and stuff. And so you'd be like, unless you really knew or were into wrestling, you didn't know that, the guys, unless you saw just like the local TV shows or some trades that you read or magazines you read that were like, oh yeah, there's some other guys over here that are pretty cool. But yeah, it was one of those things is like into when I was a little kid, I was like, oh, this is just, I could already see the resonating of like poor man's theater in there. It's like it's guys as a sporting event. It sort of it was traditionally right supposed to be a sporting event where they'd like do Greco-Roman slash doing holds and maneuvers to try to like wrestle, right? And it just started to become more of the theatrical spot of it as as it consolidated, as McMahon took over the territories and turned it into what it became, and then everybody who was emulating was just making it more and more, uh, about the theater part of it, but that's what's great about it, because there is it's like bad guy, good guy. They're gonna come in here, they're gonna kick some ass, and then somebody's gonna win, and maybe it won't be the guy you like, or maybe it will be the guy you like. You never know, So, yeah. Anyways, I had been doing a wrestling comic probably since the I don't know third or fourth grade. I started one, so all these characters, and we got to talking because he had already started he had kind of was toying around with this idea of mid galactic championship wrestling, and it already oozed into the Gwar show where initially, if it was like a show where we were like, okay, there's just going to be the belts of total world domination, and that's who's going to determine who wins whatever match, and it'll just be a series of matches for the entire show. All these different characters will come out and wrestle each other, and then steal the belts or take the belts or do all the traditional stuff you do in wrestling. And but we were talking about it, and that was one of the first projects that me and him worked on together. Was we started doing the Dogface Boy strip, which was that was the first time that we had actually jammed together on a strip. And he did all the layout and wrote the initial one, and then I inked it and penciled parts of it or whatever. And once we got into there, we just started. I think we did a whole crap ton of matches that we didn't even publish. There was a whole bunch of them. We had to build up to a character called Dr. Steroid. He came out with this like assistant who was like this really big, she was kind of chunky but like big nurse character that she was like she had Botox and silicone implants and butt implants and every implant you could think of, so she's very like, animated looking, but he was really wimpy and skinny, right? And he had this like medical device that he would strap onto his chest and it would just inject steroids into all different parts of his body, and it would just make like he'd Hulk out. It'd be like his arm would get freakishly huge, so like if he's throwing a punch, it'd be like his arm would get big in mid throw, so it'd be like whoosh, and so we had one of my characters who was one of the characters I created when I was like a kid, right? His name was Max. He was like a luchador kind of guy, right? And he was wrestling him, and it's the whole time he's getting his ass kicked by this little wimpy doctor guy, and because he keeps like using it to make his body crazy. So then he figures out, he's like, oh, so it's this little medical device. So he just starts wailing on the medical device and starts pumping him up to where he becomes this like body, and then he hits it one last time and it like makes all his muscles explode. So he's just like sitting there as this like withered husk on the corner, But those are strips that probably will never see the light of day. They just they were kind of lost to the ether, I guess. But yeah, we had probably 3 or 4 issues planned of because we had all these characters and all these storylines that we wanted to finish out, and we just got to the publishing the one issue, and then Gwar is a very time demanding kind of thing, and it just got just kind of fell to the wayside. We didn't get to do it. We had ideas for like a TV show. We wanted to have we wanted to start a whole wrestling league with it, to where we could do like some of the characters, like Dogface Boy would just be a puppet. So you could like puppetize them for the scenes, but then in the wrestling matches, you could just have the guys throwing the puppet around and throwing it in the air and smashing it and beating the crap out of it and stuff. And, we wanted to bring that Gwar aesthetic to it and have like that be like, oh, it's like wrestling, but it's just that cartoony. I think Big Battle Kaiju did something like that, where they had basically did that idea. They took their aesthetic and made it like all cartoony, where you had like the Plantain Brothers, which were the guys that would wrestle their tag team, whatever. They put a big city in the ring and then have the monsters smash it up, or that kind of stuff. So they had definitely had the same kind of idea, like, but they'd actually do it live, which I thought that was great too. Like doing a live wrestling show like that. I think they actually did a TV series for a minute too, but yeah, it was cool. But anyways, yeah. So to your question about that, I don't know. Do you have any other questions about that?
Oh yeah. Well, who's your favorite wrestler, man? You got a favorite wrestler?
And like it always, so it always kind of floats between who is it now and who was it then? Because I like so many of them, and if you look at like ability versus their flair or their show, their ability to be just a iconic kind of character. There's too many of them that are good, that are just like. It was funny. We went to trying to remember where it is, but it was one of those like Midwestern. It's deemed as one of the official wrestling museums, right? And we were there, and we're going through it, and actually the owner was there, and he was like, he was like interested, like, hey, so what are you guys? You were a band, okay, blah blah. And so we started talking to him, and as he's talking to me, I start to realize who this dude is, right? And he goes over and he grabs these saddlebags, and he was one of those like heel characters that would like have the cowboy motif, but he'd have the saddlebags, and in the one bag, in the one side, he'd have candy that he threw out at the kids, like, "Hey, I'm such a nice guy. I'm such a nice guy," you know. And then on the other side, before he pulled it out, I said, "There's a horseshoe in there," and sure enough, he pulls the horseshoe out of the other side. He's like, "That's the side that you tune the other guy up with," you know. And then you pull the horseshoe out and be like, like I beat the crap out of him with the horseshoe. But it's like that. That was what was so amazing about I didn't even know who like if you just looked at the dude, I would be like, I don't remember you. But then as soon as he did that, I was like, I remember watching you when I was a kid and blah blah blah. You were so awesome. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I mean, right now I'm liking Rhea Ridley. I'm liking her a lot. She's awesome. I like her character. I like all the arc with her as well, because she's got like the crazier look, and she kind of has that China arc, right? Like she's going into that whole arc of stuff, and and that's kind of a interesting to me, in that sense, as far as new stuff goes. But if you talk about the greats, like Ric Flair and fucking, Roddy Piper, oh God, there's so many, Bruiser Brody, freaking any of the, like it's just too many, dude. Like they're all freaking great, man. And yeah, I think like with the funniest one is like, Hunter was, because he was a big wrestling fan too. He, being down here in the South, he predominantly loved to just stir the pot, right? So of course, if you're gonna go to the wrestling match, the best way to antagonize people would just be on the side of the Russians. So Nikita, Ivan, all the Koloffs, that's it, right? He'd have the big Russian hammer and sickle jersey on, and he'd be like, "Yeah!" every time they come out, and then all the people in the Coliseum were like, "Fuck you!" "Oh, you un-American piece of shit!" Like it's just like it was so great, man. It was like the fact that it would incite that much, like craziness with people. It's like amazing, and to find out like half those guys aren't even Russian. It's like too funny.
But my all-time favorite wrestler, Ricky Morton.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I
yeah.
mean, because
Yeah, like that. You kind of have that look going, right?
Yeah, we got the same hair, man.
It's funny. With your look right there, I have a wrestler. It was a combination. It was supposed to be like a Ric Flair kind of spinoff guy, but he was Ricky Gold, and that was his name, and he had like the visor glasses, but they looked like Colossus from the X-Men, little, and yeah, he would go from being like champion back and forth, because originally when I did the strips, I just took all my friends in school and made them wrestlers. So I, like one of my friends, like, I love ninjas. So he was Jerry Fu was his name. It's like, but he's like dressed as a ninja and stuff. And but yeah, then anybody who was there, we kind of just made different characters. But Ricky Gold was this wave of guys that we did. Like I did a Jake the Snake kind of character that was named Python. He was actually like a snake guy, and yeah, so there was tons of like stuff like that was just inspired definitely by what was happening at the time, because I definitely loved watching those tapes when I was a kid. Like you'd see the super old man matches where the guys who had been wrestling since the 50s who were actually trying to do a wrestling match, and then you'd see the guys who come out and obviously be like like Dusty Rhodes doing the like, oh my God, I got hit, doing a boogie woogie before you fall down or something, It's like, too funny, man. Oh, speaking of those guys, his kids are amazing, man. I love when they did that. So when Stardust, or it was Gold Dust and Stardust, when they did the tag team, that was that was amazing watching those matches. Those guys were like doing lucha maneuvers and shit. I was just like, what the hell? You know, where was this stuff back in the, WCW or WWF when you guys were over there? Like, amazing. I did like the fact that I'd watched it live when Dustin Rhodes he had gotten, I guess it was back over at WCW, and he did the thing. He played that character Seven. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
They had him float on the wires and then lower him into the ring, and he gets the mic and he's like, "This guy's supposed to be called Seven, and I'm not going to do this." Drops the mic and then leaves. It's just like, fuck this character. I was like, that's awesome. He's just like, walk away from it and be like, oh man.
Well, it was so weird because they did like the videos, like the vignettes, and he was like the Seven, and he would like go into like the child's bedroom,
Yeah.
and he's like looking in this like the window and looking at the kid, and it's just like what? Like this is like I don't think he was into that.
Yeah. It was around that same time I was living in Atlanta. I worked on well, I'd met through Jerry Only when the Misfits were wrestling a whole bunch. I met this wrestler that he was trying to get to do kind of a Crimson Ghost character, because they were trying to like spin off from Vampiro and have some other stuff that they could do there. And so he was a character called Glacier. And so when we met, he had a costume that he'd already it was Mortal Kombat style, and he wanted to have something that was more rubber, that he could wear pieces of it, so he didn't have to take all his stuff off. He could just wear it because it was rubber and it wouldn't hurt anybody or whatever. So I made him a whole outfit. Like I redid a whole, made him a face plate and a chest plate and leggings and gauntlets and stuff, and he wrestled in it for. There was a few shows he did it with the costume I built with him, but they were pitching him to be like Booker T's, bodyguard / henchman or whatever. And the idea was that he was going to be like the worst superhero ever. So it's like all the vignettes were going to be him like, okay, I'm helping the little old lady across the street. Oh no, there's a cat in the tree. Hold on, let me. And then little old lady gets hit by a car, and that kind of stuff. Where he's like, oh look, I got the cat. Oh no, the little old lady, And so like every time Booker T would go out, he'd be like posing and signing autographs and stuff. And then the guys who wanted to kick his ass would go kick his ass. And they're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? He's like, I was signing autographs. And, it's like, so, but it was right when WWF had absorbed WCW, so they cut anybody who didn't have long standing, or basically the B guys all got cut out and then took the A guys over, and whatever. But but it was cool because it was like, oh, I got to go. Actually, when I was there, I got to go over to Dusty Rhodes' gym, and I got to meet him and the two sons and everybody, and it was cool, man. Those guys were awesome. And yeah, it was neat to be able to kind of dip my toe in that world for a second, Yeah.
But Glacier, yeah, he wrestles up here in Michigan occasionally.
Oh, is he still do? I haven't seen him in a.
He was with AEW for like a couple of times. Like he like shows up there like once in a while.
Is he still rolling with Glacier?
He has a different name, but it's like the same.
Okay.
Probably like rights and stuff. But the thing I always loved about Glacier was like he was like the kind of like a martial arts guy, Mortal Kombat, Southern accent.
Yep.
He had like the Southern accent, Yep. But he's like totally in the martial arts. Like he's like legit, but like super thick Southern accent,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Took body casts of him in my friend's in his shop, and it was funny because he just would sit there and tell us wrestling stories and stuff. We've done so many things. Like Gwar has always kind of tried to go that route where we've done wrestling matches. Like we did some matches at Dragon Con, like Hunter and it was Hunter and Dave, and I think it was, I'm trying to remember, I might be confusing the two matches because I remember Danielle was in a match. it was Misfits, so it was Jerry Only and somebody else was in there. But I remember Danielle jumping on to Jerry Only and like, trying to roll him over and stuff. It was pretty funny. But we would do like these matches because in our show we typically have a referee character that would be like the guy who'd be the gore effect. So like the clamp would get on his head and his head would explode, or a chest rip or something. And we did this weird kind of like backyard type of not backyard type of wrestling. It was some sort of event. This promoter like stupidly didn't pay attention to the calendar and was like, I'm gonna book a show on Super Bowl Sunday. That'll work out good, right? And it was just like, we're driving up going, wait, isn't the Super Bowl today? Like what who's gonna be at this thing? And they had some extreme wrestlers, but they had guys like Jimmy Snuka and some of those guys that were there wrestling. So we got to meet those guys, but it was just like, it was sad because you're like, here's 20 people to wrestle in front of, but we did the Gwar effect where we had the ref come out, Bobby played the ref, and we crunched his head, and I think we ripped his chest too. And he had an extinguisher so we could shoot the spew out. And of course, as soon as we shoot the spew out on people, they're like, "What the hell is this?" They're like, "It's 20 people that were there are starting to leave now." It's like, oh no, what are we doing? But yeah, we used to do stuff with the local. We had a local luchador wrestling league that was in town, and we'd do some matches with them. Me and Dave wrestled with them a couple times, and that was fun. But we weren't as skilled or trained as some of those other guys. Yeah, those other guys are definitely taking the high risk jumps off the top of the place we were doing. It was at this club and had a balcony. And they were jumping from the balcony into the ring, So it's like at least a good 20 feet, flying it down. It's like, ay. But good times. Anyways, yeah, wrestling's awesome.
I only got like a couple more, man. So you're playing I think June 1st, man, Grand Rapids. You're playing with Static X, man. And there's a connection between Static X and Gwar, man. You were both on the Universal Soldier: The Return soundtrack.
That's right. Yeah, it's funny. Like when we had gotten those little spatterings of like people playing the music in the movies and stuff, and it's fun that the Universal Soldier is one of them. It's so good. But yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, they're definitely. It's been cool to see how they've handled their situation, but also like their production and their show and everything. It's amazing now. It's like it's so crazy. It feels very similar in some ways, minus the spew, right? But but visually and aesthetically, it's pretty amazing show.
And also, I got like a cameo from Sawborg from my mom.
Oh yeah,
for Mother's Day.
What does Sawborg have to say? Huh?
I think you were nice. You just wished her. I don't think she was too happy. I don't think she was happy, but it was funny for me.
That's
but
good.
my grandma, her 80th is coming up next month, so I'm thinking maybe I might book a cameo from Sawborg.
That'd be a good one.
Well, dude, this has been fantastic. I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you so much, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, man. Thanks. Great discussion, man.
I'll see you June 1st.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right.